Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Kuh, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick Fitzgerald. In this episode, we're going to go over, just the trade deadline, because that just finished up right before we started recording. So we'll talk about that. We'll cover some of the injury news. There's still a little bit of that going on right now. And then, of course, we will have some streamer recommendations at the end of the show. But before we get into it, just a reminder, you can follow our podcast on Twitter, This Week PL. You can send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen. Make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. So that all being said, Patrick, how are you doing? How's your trade deadline day going?
I feel like I got a little bit of whiplash, trying to follow all the deals that have been going on. But I'm on vacation right now, down in the Outer Banks, North Carolina, as you can probably tell by my slight sunburn and the sign behind me, also. But yeah, so I'm off, so I had a lot of time to follow the deals. I had my Jeff Passan notifications on, and they were blowing up. So a lot of moving parts today.
Yeah, I felt like I just got hit by a truck. I was traveling for work today, so I wasn't chronically online like I usually am. So the past couple days, I've been getting a lot of Jeff Passan notifications, but today, obviously driving, so I was not getting those notifications. And every time I made a stop, I just had to check and see what was the craziest new deal that just happened. So yeah, really insane day. Not just for the Twins, but I think just for Major League Baseball in general. The big names that were traded, I think, were the ones that were expected. There was obviously a couple that were just kind of out of the blue that no one expected. We'll obviously talk about that in a little bit. But overall, a pretty nuts day, but not really too many consequential moves, I'd say.
Yeah, I think especially in the starting pitching market, a limited amount of options available. I think that teams clearly took an approach of, okay, we can't get those big top end difference makers, so we're going to make a ton of little moves that will hopefully make that difference that we're looking for. So a lot of platoon bats, a lot of relievers, ton of closers. So there's definitely some fantasy fallout there. So teams, trying to round out their rosters because a lot of the big pieces weren't necessarily available.
Yeah, two surprising, or actually maybe three surprising names that I think maybe that we didn't see get traded. Sandy Alcantara, Dylan Cease, and Luis Robert Jr. all stayed in their current homes. Of course, with Sandy, he's been having a pretty down year this season, so it's not surprising that teams probably weren't willing to take the price that the Marlins were asking for. For Dylan Cease, maybe kind of a similar situation, but also I think the Padres probably still think that there's something left in the tank for him, that he can still contribute in a major way this year. And then Luis Robert Jr., I mean, it was just an obvious move for the White Sox to make, and I think maybe no one was meeting their asking price for Robert as well. So three names that I was fully expecting to see come across, my Jeff Passan notifications, but just didn't happen.
Yeah, and Edward Cabrera too. I was thinking with Sandy, maybe I think his last two starts have been scoreless or close to it. Maybe that
Yes.
would, help the Marlins kind of sell at the price they're looking for, but it might have still been a high asking price. So a little surprising to see him not move with everybody that did move and the lack of starting pitching available, but the trade deadline continues to be pretty unpredictable.
Yeah, which I guess just means that we're going to have a very interesting offseason as well. Like you mentioned, not a lot of starting pitchers traded this during this trade deadline season, but I could see more pitchers being moved in the offseason when things are maybe a little bit clearer and teams aren't kind of scrambling to find options for their rotations.
Yeah. Orioles traded 9 players away, trying to stockpile the farm system, and for me, it's they need to sign a starting pitcher to a multi-year deal or trade for one in the offseason with a couple of years of club control, kind of full stop. We replenished the system, and now we got to trade those guys, I think, in the offseason to set us up for next year. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into all the trade deadline deals, let's talk through some of the injury news. Some pretty significant stuff, but actually some real good news, I think, on their injury list. We're going to start with Isaac Paredes of the Astros. Unfortunately for him, he was dealing with a hamstring strain, and now he's likely going to miss 2 months or pretty much the rest of the season. And yeah, it's it's unlikely that we're going to see Isaac Paredes before the playoffs for the Astros. Ronald Acuna Jr. of Atlanta, big scare here when he got injured earlier this week, but the team announced that it's just a grade 1 right calf strain. So he's only going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks rather than potentially out for 9 months like everyone was initially expecting. I think a lot of expectations was that he tore his Achilles, but thankfully that is not the case for Acuna. And then Luke Raley of the Mariners going on the IL with back spasms. He's going to be out for at least the minimum, if not a little bit longer. So those were some of the notable ones I think that got put on the IL. Obviously for Acuna, I think that's just really good news for everyone, fantasy and Atlanta fans alike.
Yeah, good thing it wasn't worse. Don't imagine they'll rush him back just given the way their season's going, but hopefully, people who drafted Acuna can get him for their fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, he's been decent this year. Obviously, the steals have not been there for Acuna, but the power and the bat's been pretty solid. So maybe not really worth the draft pick that you spent on Acuna, but still, he had been at least returning some fantasy value this year instead of being a complete zero like last season.
Yeah, ton of pop.
Yeah. All right, some returns from the injury list. Blake Snell, he is likely to be pitching on Saturday for the Dodgers. Good to see him back. Luis Gil of the Yankees had 75 pitches in his last rehab start. He should also be activated for Saturday as well. And Brandon Lau came back earlier this week for the Tampa Bay Rays. Out of Snell and Heel, both those guys have probably been stashed on the injured list, but, let's just say you're in a league that somehow has no IL spots and no one was trying to stash either of them. Is there one between either of those pitchers that you would like better for rest of season?
Yeah, Snell for sure. He definitely has higher upside, and Heel, I think, was a little bit out over his skis last year. Obviously he had a great season and won Rookie of the Year, but he did kind of wear down over the second half. So Snell by a mile.
Yeah, I think I'm with the same thing there, just because Heel obviously younger and doesn't have as much pedigree as Snell does, and obviously both of them, really really solid pitchers last season. Snell was obviously really good because I believe didn't he win the Cy Young, or was that the year before?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So I mean, you got a previous Cy Young winner coming back, playing for the Dodgers, right? Like it's a pretty good scenario for fantasy. All right, moving on to just some other injury news. Trio of Tampa Bay Rays after today's game are currently day-to-day. Yonder Diaz, Chandler Simpson, and Jonathan Aranda all kind of just monitored their situations because they got injured in today's game. Jeremy Pena of the Astros, he's likely ready to return this weekend for the Stros, and they're going to need him because, again, they just are dealing with a bunch of injuries in their infield. Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers, a little bit of a scare. His most recent start was cramping after 51 pitches, but he says he's expected to make his next appearance on the mound. Juan Soto of the Mets should be back on the lineup this weekend. He's been kind of dealing with some litany of injuries this week, but he should be back soon. Roki Sasaki is facing hitters this weekend, but that really shouldn't signal anything in terms of an imminent return. I think the Dodgers are going to be very patient with him. Max Muncy could be returning next week to the Dodgers. Jackson Chourio dealing with a right hamstring spasm. He's currently day-to-day. He could be put on the IL, so just definitely check on that and see what Chourio's status is. Hunter Green is up to 50 pitches in his last rehab start. It didn't go super well, but honestly, the main thing is just seeing him be able to kind of be on the mound for long enough, and so he's kind of making his way back. I'd probably expect one or two more rehab starts, and honestly, Cincinnati's probably going to take their time with him as well, just because he's been on the injured list for so long this season. Cade Povich of the Orioles, 86 pitches in his last rehab start. Would expect him to probably have a spot in the rotation. I know the Orioles traded Charlie Morton, but I don't believe anyone else from the rotation was traded, correct?
Yeah, but Zach Eflin went on the IL, so I think it's going to be Brandon Young and Cade Povich slotting in for those two guys.
Okay, yeah, so probably expect him when he returns, likely next week. For Povich, he could be an interesting pickup in a deeper league if you're looking to stream some pitchers. Michael King likely starting his rehab assignment this weekend, but again, for him, it's probably going to be a long road back as well. I would not expect him to see him on a major league mound until deep into August. And then Andrew Judge, some good news for him. He is likely returning next week. Aaron Boone specifically said August 5th, which would be Tuesday, the start of their series next week. So, thankfully only out for a limited amount of time, but he is going to be DHing That seems to be the path that the Yankees are going to take because they don't want to risk anything with that arm, which could mean some very interesting things for how the Yankee lineup gets shuffled around. They did pick up some outfield reinforcements. They're in this trade deadline, specifically Austin Slater. So that's kind of an option for them to play an outfield while Judge is DHing. But yeah, it's just going to be a lineup you're going to need to check. And if you have any Yankees, just make sure they're in the lineup before you start in a daily league.
Yeah, I think that the injury is probably going to affect Judge's hitting a little bit, but he's so far, above and beyond that. Obviously, they're willing to take that hit. And then going back to Churio, I actually just saw an update from like 20 minutes ago that he's probably going to go on the IL. So, tough loss there. Hopefully, it's a short stint.
Yeah, they termed it, I guess, as a spasm. They haven't necessarily said it was a strain yet, so hopefully it's minimum, but it could be anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks depending on how serious the injury is. All right, that wraps it up for injury news. We are going to talk about a bunch of trades. We're not going to cover every single one because frankly, not every single one is relevant for fantasy. But there is a lot of names we got to talk about. And so we are going to start with Josh Naylor. So Josh Naylor, in 93 games with Arizona this year, had 11 homers, 49 runs, 59 RBI, 11 stolen bases, /292, 360 for 47. He was traded to Seattle. And I guess the unfortunate thing for Naylor is that he goes from one of the better parks for lefties in Chase Field to essentially the worst park for lefties at T-Mobile. So any thoughts on Josh Naylor? How does this impact his fantasy value? Obviously it's not a trade where I'm dropping him, but it probably knocks him down the order of first baseman for the rest of the season.
Yeah, the thing that struck me in the few days since the trade is that he was just running like crazy when the Mariners acquired him. He had 4 steals in his first 4 games as a Mariner, which Josh Naylor does steal bags, even though he doesn't look like he steals a lot of bags. He does usually chip in. So if the Mariners are gonna let him run more than the Diamondbacks were, that would be nice. Obviously, early returns are encouraging, but super small sample size. In terms of the rest of it, lineup context in the park that you were hinting at, I think that's a slight downgrade. The Mariners, obviously strengthened their lineup, right? They brought Naylor in, and they brought Suarez in too, right? So they strengthened their lineup with Diamondbacks guys. So it's going to be a better lineup, but we know how tough of a place to hit T-Mobile Park is. So I think that, maybe a slight downgrade for Naylor in the average department, but I think he'll still be a steady contributor. But he's also one of those guys where the shape of his production varies tremendously year to year. Like last year, he had 30 home runs and hit 243 with 108 RBIs, and now he's hitting almost 300 with 12 home runs and 15 steals. So it's kind of hard to predict where he's going to contribute, but he is a pretty solid fantasy contributor.
Yeah, last year was kind of the weird year where he hit 30 homers because he hadn't gone above 20 in the past couple seasons. Just not a very prototypical power hitter. The slugging has always stayed a little under 500. Even last season when he hit 31 homers, his slugging was at 456. And so definitely a little bit more of an average or kind of a hit tool sort of first baseman as opposed to a power guy, which is not necessarily what you expect out of the first baseman position, but he's been very productive in terms of fantasy, counting stats, average wise. So still a valuable player nonetheless.
Yep.
Well, you kind of mentioned it, Eugenio Suarez. Let's just talk about him. I love Eugenio Suarez. I've got a soft spot for him, and he did really well this year. It's one of the best years he's had so far. 36 homers in 106 games for the Diamondbacks, 64 runs, 87 RBI. /248, 320, 576. Unfortunately for him, Chase Field is the second best park for righties, and of course, T-Mobile is the worst park for righties based on StatCast park factors. Eugenio also a little bit of a streaky player, right? He hits homers in bunches. If you look at the month-to-month stats, actually, he's hit 10 homers in every month except May, where he hit 5. So maybe the streaky kind of thing for him. He's maybe dodged that a little bit this season because he's been hitting more homers each month. But yeah, just thoughts on Eugenio. Obviously, one thing we didn't mention in injury news, he did get hit in the hand a couple days back, but the X-rays came back negative. So no issue there. Hopefully for him going forward. But yeah, any thoughts on Eugenio and his move to Seattle as well?
Yeah, hopefully no, lingering issues from that hit by pitch. I think similarly to Naylor, just a slight downgrade for a lineup in Park. If there's someone who, wants to buy him, I think in most of our leagues, the trade deadline is kind of coming up, at least for leagues that have a trade deadline, in the next week or so. So if someone wants to buy him, at full price of the production that he's put up this year, because he was doing it the second half of last year too, and they're a believer, I'd listen to offers for an SP2 or something like that. But he's a super reliable power hitter. His pull air rate's off the charts this year. It's over 30%, which is like dark red on his Savant page. So he's pulling fly balls as well as anybody else. So I think the power is sustainable. And obviously he's played it in Seattle before with a decent level of success. Not, what he's doing so far this year, but it's not a completely, foreign environment to him.
Yeah, 31 homers in his first season in Seattle in 2022, which is certainly not something to scoff at. That's pretty good production. Kind of the notable thing is that his average has kind of increased the last two seasons he was in Arizona. So it was 256 last year, 248 this year, but his two seasons in Seattle, 236, 232. So would not be surprised to see that average take a little bit of a hit in Seattle. And it's kind of funny just the career he's had, just with so many seasons in Cincinnati where, he was just hitting bombs like crazy, and then he goes to the worst park possible for that kind of production. And then Arizona, pretty decent park, like you mentioned, second for righties, sixth for lefties in Statcast park factors, and now he's back in Seattle, which is going to be interesting to see how he transitions to that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move over to the pitching side a little bit and talk about a pitcher who, honestly, I have no idea if this is going to matter for fantasy, but Shane Bieber traded to Toronto. He has yet to start this season. He is coming back for Tommy John. His last full-ish season was actually 2023, where he had 21 starts. I don't know what to expect from Shane Bieber, and he's still on the injured list, I believe. So is this someone who is like maybe worth a target? Obviously, Toronto is on an incredible hot streak right now. They're one of the best teams in baseball. Would you pick up Shane Bieber just to get the wins from Toronto, or is there maybe something that that could be more with Bieber?
Yeah, I would go for it. He's up to 58 pitches in rehab assignment, so probably 2 rehab starts away, assuming they're going to be pretty cautious. They're kind of getting by right now with Bassett, Lauer, and Max Scherzer, who, you can't really count on at this point to stay healthy as their 3 through 5 pitchers. So I think Bieber will be a nice addition. I don't know if he's going to displace somebody or they'll go 6-man. Someone could always get hurt. But yeah, I'm definitely adding him if he's not already added. Before he went down last year, he was showing increased velocity. I think it was only like 2 or 3 starts, but he was looking really good. So yeah, I'd be happy to have him, kind of like a stash piece for the stretch runner for the playoffs in most leagues. I think he could offer, like a similar profile to his new teammate, Kevin Gossman, where like there's some ERA risk, but he has good control. He's not going to, destroy your whip, and he should get a decent amount of strikeouts. So yeah, I think he's a, kind of a must roster stash.
Yeah. All right. One move, not really going to talk about this too much. Tyler Rogers got traded to the Mets. He should be in line to get holds. And honestly, it's actually not a bad idea to think about picking him up if you're in a Sims hold league, because the Mets rotation just does not go deep. They've got the 4th fewest quality starts in the league. It's a good option for, at least if you're looking for a reliever who can get a win. He is 3rd in the pecking order because kind of some other moves that were made. Specifically, Ryan Helsley was traded to the Mets, and for him, right now it's kind of a 2-headed monster with Helsley and Edwin Diaz. How do you feel about Helsley? Like, is he a guy who you think still worth targeting in saves only leagues, or is he kind of a person that maybe has kind of dipped in value now because of this trade to the Mets?
Yeah, I think you just got to cut ties with him, unfortunately. Edwin Diaz has just been lights out almost all season. So I think you just gotta let him go. Unfortunately, I think his relevance in that format is kind of gone. And yeah, Tyler Rogers, great holds option, like you said. I think he pitches a ton, and I imagine it's because like his throwing motion maybe doesn't put as much stress on his arm as other guys. Like his appearance totals from the last 5 years, 80, 68, 68, 77, and 53 this year, projected to end at 77. So he's pitching almost half the games. I mean, he's gonna really rack up holds, especially on a team like that.
Yeah. Someone in kind of a similar situation here, Phil Maton, who was traded from St. Louis to Texas this year. And Texas is a little different. Their closer outlook has been all over the place this season. We've seen a bunch of people in that slot. Most recently, it's been kind of Robert Garcia has been kind of the closer. He just got the save yesterday, but again, this the team has not been doing well enough, or really just been in that many save situations to have a kind of a predefined closer. So Phil Madden, is he kind of a guy that you would be targeting in saves leagues as opposed to someone like Ryan Helsley, who is going into a situation where there's a defined closer? Man's going into a situation where there really is not a defined closer.
Yeah, I think if you have an easy cut, I think you could go for him. But there's some other guys who we'll probably talk about later that I probably prefer ahead of him. Maton, he's been in the league for a long time, but he only has 7 career saves. So ideally, he'll still be on the wire in your shallower saves leagues. And you can, get a look and feel out how the Rangers closing situation is going to go. Garcia's been good, but not incredible. Maybe it'll be a mix and match thing based on handedness. So I think that he will get some saves. So like, in NFBC leagues where saves are huge, right? You might want to put a low speculative bid in a 12-teamer, might have to bid a little more in a 15-teamer. In like our, Yahoo, ESPN, more shallower leagues, I think you can kind of wait and see and feel it out. But he has good skills. His velo has ticked up this year. I have him in a holds league, and he's been great. So I think he's at least worth keeping an eye on.
All right. Maybe let's just keep the conversation on relievers since a bunch of them got traded.
Mhm.
Let's start in San Diego, where huge move here, where the Athletics traded Mason Miller, who is one of the best closers in baseball, in my opinion, to the Padres, who in turn traded one of the best prospects in baseball, and Leo DeVries to the Athletics. And of course, this makes a very interesting situation in the bullpen for San Diego because Robert Suarez has been the closer. Admittedly, not great numbers this season. He's had a lot of saves, but the numbers aren't very good in terms of his ratios. So, yeah, Mason Miller versus Robert Suarez. Who ultimately do you think kind of wins out that closer battle in San Diego?
Yeah, it's interesting because they've both kind of had their blow up outings this year. I think Suarez, particular, has had like two like 5+ run outings, and Miller's ERA was over 4 for a while and it's just under 4 now. So that's not indicative of the type of pitchers they are necessarily, but they've had their struggles so far this year. I probably lean towards Suarez just because he's the incumbent. He's like a little more of a veteran. I could see them maybe using Miller in like a fireman role. He just gets so many strikeouts and has such an overpowering fastball. And I think there's also some rumblings that they might stretch him out as a starter like in the future. So maybe they'll use him in more of like a, multi-inning high leverage role this year. So I think Suarez will still get the majority of the saves, but this is a bullpen that has a lot of other good arms, right? The Padres have completely supercharged their bullpen. They have Morahone and Jason Adam and guys who have already, been getting a lot of wins and saves. So I think Suarez is still, the best bet for the majority going forward, but it definitely got a little cloudier.
Yeah, it kind of annoys me as a manager who's been a big fan of Jeremiah Estrada this year in saves holds
Yeah, him
leagues,
too. Yeah.
and he's just been pushed down the pecking order. Um, this season as just other guys have kind of, especially specifically Morihone, like has really come alive in that bullpen, really kind of taken over that setup man role. But even him now is, he's kind of now a sixth, seventh inning sort of person. And to that point about Mason Miller, I would not be surprised if they try to stretch him out. When he first came up with the A's, obviously he came up as a starter, and then they decided to limit his innings and move him to that closer role. And obviously he's been great in that role as well, just with his velocity. But it would be very interesting to see them try to convert him to a starter. Obviously they kind of did that with Michael King. And I would say that the Padres rotation is not anything robust. Like they could very easily add another starter if they wanted to. I mean, they did trade for JP Sears as part of this deal as well. So, yeah, I would not be very surprised to see them try to take that route next season and see if that works for Miller.
Yeah, he's got 4 years of control after this year, so it could be, it's a risky move, right? Because he's already good in the role he's in, but the rewards could be pretty high.
Yeah. All right. Another player that we're going to talk about, Kyle Finnegan, who honestly, unless you're like really deep into fantasy baseball, like I don't think most people even know who Kyle Finnegan is. He's one of those guys who frustratingly is like always on a saves list because he was the only option in Washington for the longest time to be picking up saves. Now he gets traded to Detroit, which admittedly also did not have a very solid closer situation. I mean, Will Vest has been kind of the guy for them the past month ish or so. But yeah, with Finnegan kind of moving into Detroit, how do you think that closer situation shapes up? Is that still Vest to lose, or do you think Finnegan kind of steps in as the main closer?
Yeah, I like best chances to hold on to the majority of the saves. Detroit's so hard to predict. They make us look foolish all the time and use their pitching in really unconventional but successful ways. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Finnegan get saves here and there because of his experience, but just from a skills perspective, I think Vest is still the guy. And then in Washington, I think unfortunately it kind of falls under the umbrella. And there's a couple of teams now that are like this, the A's probably included, where it's like we don't know who the guy is and we don't really care. There's just nobody that's good enough. If we see someone emerge, obviously keep track of who's getting saves on those teams. But right now, I don't think there's anyone you should run out and add.
Yeah, that was the weird thing about Finnegan, was like he was always good for like 25 to 30 saves the past couple seasons, so that's why he was kind of worth holding on to in fantasy. The ratios were never like stellar or anything like that,
No.
but at least he was getting saves, so in that sort of respect, he was worth it. But yeah, it's kind of hard to really pick out a guy in this Washington bullpen right now. Roster Resource has Jose Ferrer as the closer, and that's mainly because he picked up a hold on the on Monday. And other than that, there has not been that much success from that bullpen.
Yeah.
All right, a couple other really interesting moves, specifically for the Yankees. Camilo Doval and David Bednar, both closers ish for their previous teams. Doval was kind of the de facto closer in San Francisco after Ryan Walker lost the job there. David Bednar has kind of been up and down on whether he's the closer for Pittsburgh, but I think as of recently, he was still kind of the fireman setup role kind of guy. Both of those guys go to the Yankees. Let's first talk about their former team. So Duvall is now out of San Francisco. Does that make Ryan Walker, or really Randy Rodriguez probably is the other name to consider? Either of those, are those immediate pickups for you?
Yeah, I think Randy Rodriguez is because of his skills and hopefully saves. I don't think he's going to be the full-time guy, but he's been one of the best relievers in baseball this year, period. So if he's getting, any decent amount of saves looks, he's worth an ad. I think in the past, they've said they're a little reluctant to use him in back-to-back games because it's not something that he has a lot of experience with. So that might impact his usage a little bit. So maybe Walker will chip into he'll get a share of the saves. But I think Rodriguez is the big one there for sure.
All right. And then moving on to Pittsburgh, which frankly, there's just not that many save situations, but regardless, got to look at it. So yeah, it's kind of been a little bit of a closer by committee between Dennis Santana and David Bednar. Santana, is probably the closer to be right now for that team. Is there any reason to consider any other pitchers in that bullpen, or is Santana just kind of the guy that you should be holding on to if you're looking for a closer?
Yeah, I think just him. It was surprising that he didn't move. I think he's been good this year. Probably better than his actual skills are, but good enough that he'll get some saves. And I think he probably ranks ahead of like the A's situation and the Nats situation and the Orioles situation. But I don't think I'd like him as much as like Randy Rodriguez or somebody like that.
Yeah, the nice thing about Santana, in my opinion, is just that he has the role, right? Like we know no one's probably going to be passing him to be getting saves in that on that team. So at least for now, it makes sense that if you're hunting for saves and he's available, go pick him up if somehow he's still on the wire.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the Yankees. And it's been a weird situation for them actually the entire season with closing, right? Like Devin Williams initially had the job and then he lost it. And then Luke Weaver had the job. And then Devin Williams came back from injury, and then Aaron Boone's like, they're going to share duties. And then it was like, no, Devin Williams actually is just the closer now. But now, yeah, with the addition of Bednar and Duvall, this just makes everything so confusing to the point where if you have Devin Williams on your team in a saves league, are you holding on to him?
I'm holding on to him, but I'm nervous, and I'm definitely listening to trade offers. I believe once he got the role back, he was really looking good, and then lately he's really faltered. I think he blew a save yesterday against the Rays, and it's not the
Yes.
only outing lately that he's given up runs. Whereas David Bednar was horrible to start the year, got sent to AAA, and then has just been like lights out since. Like you look
Hmm.
at his season long line, and you would have no idea that he was demoted in the middle of this season. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him. I don't think he'll become the full-time closer, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a good amount of chances. I think he's definitely going to be ahead of Doval in the pecking order. Doval's like
Yes.
a little bit erratic. He's having a good season, but he kind of walks a lot of guys, and I wouldn't feel confident about having him out there in the ninth inning. So I think Bednar, if someone told me that he gets the most saves in the bullpen going forward, I wouldn't be surprised. So Williams still a hold because we know what he is capable of, but I'd definitely be listening to offers.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious in a saves hold league now that they've added basically two other really strong relievers. Luke Weaver's value is just plummeting, unfortunately, because now he's got instead of Devin Williams in front of him in the bullpen, now he's got three more guys in front of him. Obviously in saves hold league, I think it's very easy to interchange guys, day in day out. There's very few sort of mainstays, I would say, in those types of leagues. But is Weaver even a guy that's worth keeping on to, or is it just this too much of a logjam now at this point in that Yankees bullpen?
Yeah, I think it's kind of on the line. I wouldn't feel too bad about dropping him. His season long numbers are still good, but lately it's been a little ugly, and obviously there was an injury in there too. And yeah, now falling down the pecking order, I think that's obviously going to hurt his share. Maybe guys who pitch in the sixth inning and stuff can still get a lot of holds, but yeah, I think I'd probably prefer Bednar and maybe Doval to Weaver too.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about your team, the O's. We've kind of mentioned them. Their bullpen got decimated. Andrew Kittredge, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, all out, have been shipped out as part of the trade deadline. There's probably, I would say, very slim chance that Felix Bautista comes back this season. They have no reason to bring him back, which means there's been some interesting names in the bullpen. I was actually kind of thinking about picking up Sir Anthony when Soto got traded because like, oh, maybe he'll pick up saves, and no, he got traded. So right now, Roster Resource has Corbin Martin listed as the closer because he got a save on Tuesday. But there's been a lot of buzz on guys like Keegan Aiken or Yenio Cano. Is there any sort of is there anyone in this Orioles bullpen that you feel like, yeah, maybe that'd be worth a pickup in a saves only league?
Probably not. If you asked me this time last year, I would say Cano, but he's really fallen off. He had a miserable outing yesterday. I think he blew the game. And
Yeah.
he has his ERA is pushing 5 this year. He spent some time in AAA, so I don't think so. Aiken, I think, is the best pitcher skills wise, but obviously he's a lefty, so he might not, be getting a ton of saves. Um, and then the rest of the guys, like if you can name more than two pitchers in the Orioles bullpen and you're not an Orioles fan, I respect your baseball knowledge because we are going to be running guys out there. I mean, the Twins are going to be in the same
Yeah,
situation. We're going to
exactly.
be running guys out there that you have never heard of and almost anybody has ever heard of. So it's going to be interesting. I guess we'll get to see, some prospects or some guys, trying to earn their spot in the majors. So that'll be kind of fun. But fantasy wise, I don't think there's too much here.
Yeah. Shout out to Nick who made a pitcher breakdown on Twins reliever Pearson Ole because he's got an incredible changeup, but he got shelled for 5 runs in his appearance on Tuesday, I think, and then he immediately got sent down to AAA. Yeah, if you know who Pearson Ole is, like you just know Twins baseball. If you don't, like that's perfectly fine. You're not supposed to have that kind of knowledge, but
Yeah, it's probably a good thing.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was. I would love to have picked up Keegan Aiken in the saves league, but I similarly think just being a lefty it just means he's going to be put in more specific situations rather than keeping him around till the ninth inning if they're looking for a guy to close the game.
Yeah, I think the Orioles will be better than like the Nationals and the A's down the stretch. So there might be, some saves intrigue, but I think it's not like so potent that you have to go do something now. I think it's more of a wait and see, kind of like Texas.
Hmm. All right, moving on to kind of a trio of pitchers. I don't know if it's appropriate to group these guys together, but we've got them grouped, and so we're going to talk about them. Zach Littell got traded from the Rays to Cincinnati. Not really great numbers, and he's got a really high home run per nine rate, which is kind of scary now in Great American Small Park. Michael Soroka got traded from the Nats to another NL Central team, the Cubs, and he's got some really good expected stats. His real life stats aren't that hot. 4.85 ERA versus a 3.76 xERA, but his FIP and xPEC are very similar. And then Merrill Kelly, who's been actually pretty decent in Arizona this year, 3.22 ERA, 1.06 WHIP. He now is going to be pitching in Texas, I believe. So out of these three guys, rankings wise, I think Kelly for the season has been higher. Soroka has kind of been one of those guys where, he's been dealing with, he was coming back from injury. So, we didn't know a ton about how he was going to do. But since he's been back, he's been a, nice streaming pickup. And then Zach Littell, I think, is just a guy who, if there's a good stream, maybe think about him, but he's not staying on any of your rosters. So out of these three, how do you feel about, any of them? Has their situation improved as part of their trade? Are any of these guys, drops because of where they're moving to, or any of these guys immediate pickups because of where they're moving to?
Yeah, I think Kelly and Soroka get a slight bump up for different reasons. Kelly, because Texas has been a really good place to pitch this year. I don't think it's always been that way historically, but I've been hearing, about how Rangers rotation has obviously been great, and they've had a lot of success at home. So I think that's a slight boost for him. Although the Diamondbacks, I do believe, are known for having a really strong defense. So I don't know if Texas is quite as strong. So maybe just a watch there, but he should feel pretty good about his home starts. Soroka gets a bump in wins leagues because obviously he's just pitching on a way better team. I don't think there's necessarily too much of a difference in park or anything like that, but just the win chance is a lot better. Zach Littell, I'd say, is downgrade, just going to Cincinnati. He's obviously having an awesome season, but like that, the Reds trading for Zach Littell to put Nick Martinez in the bullpen, like it feels like such a lateral move. Like they feel like the same guy, even though they haven't had the same results this year. Obviously, depth's important, right? Someone could get hurt, but like I don't feel like that move necessarily makes them that much better.
Yeah, to your point on Merrill Kelly, Globe Life Field in the last three seasons is below average par factor, 97 according to Statcast. Does have a little bit of a higher factor in terms of homers, 105, but I don't really think that's been Kelly's issue necessarily. But yeah, Soroka, Nationals Park, and Wrigley Field. Wrigley is like a little bit better for hitters for some reason. Or I guess I'm only looking at righties, so that could be different. But it's actually it's about the same for all handedness. So yeah, Soroka probably gets a little bit of a bump in the park, but yeah, I think the big thing for him is that now he's going to get wins potentially with this new team. So yeah, then Littell, I think just that home run per nine is a little scary. Otherwise, though, all three of these guys aren't necessarily immediate drops because of their movements. If you have them in any sort of league, you're still keeping them, and I think even if Soroka is like kind of on your waiver wire, which he kind of is in maybe some 12 teamers, right? He's kind of in that range. I think it feels like he's a very like an immediate pickup if you're in a wins league. Quality starts like maybe not as quick to pick him up, but wins leagues I think for sure he probably should be rostered everywhere in 12 teamers.
Yeah, you should be able to get some cheap ones.
All right, a quad of infielders who I really don't care about and have no fantasy relevance except for maybe one of them, maybe two. There could be an argument for two. Carlos Correa going back to Houston. It was a great 3-4 years, Carlos. I'm sad you're leaving. Brian Hayes going from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. That's an interesting move. Ahmed Rosario going to the Yankees, but unfortunately he's kind of going to get platooned, so there really is no fantasy value there. But Ryan McMahon is the interesting one to me because he's going from Colorado, which is a great park, to Yankee Stadium, which is a great park for lefties. And he's going to be an everyday third baseman there, pretty much, because they just have no one that can play third base on that team. So let's talk about those two third basemen, Ryan McMahon and Brian Hayes. We'll start with McMahon first. Even though it's probably a little bit of a drop in terms of park going from Colorado to the Yankees, is there any reason to kind of put McMahon on more on your radar now in fantasy?
I think it's kind of the same. It's just like you'd expect the counting stats to be better and the batting average. Not that it was good this year, like it just won't have the same, upside just because he's not playing in course. Roster Resource does say he's going to platoon. He hasn't actually sat against a left-handed starter yet. He's only been on the team a few days, but the Yankees did acquire a lot of right-handed platoon bats to play against lefties. So I'd say keep an eye on that. Obviously, that would ding his value a little bit. And then like Brian Hayes, obviously he's a terrible hitter, and that doesn't matter for him. But Noel V. Marte was playing third base for the Reds. Is he going to move to the outfield now? That's something to definitely keep an eye on because that he's been really solid this year, and the eligibility would be nice, but he also might get his playing time cut into.
Yeah, Roster Resource has Brian Hayes as the 9-hole hitter in Cincinnati. So
Where he belongs, unfortunately. He's a great fielder, but just hasn't
yeah,
figured it out.
unfortunate. Yeah, so I think for all these four infielders, it's hard to say that any of them are like, oh yeah, you should pick them up now that they're on a new team. But maybe something to track Rick McMahon if somehow it's looking a little bit better and he is playing every day, then it could be interesting. But I kind of agree, all of them probably are on the waiver wire in at least 12 teamers. Maybe you have some of them in a 15 teamer, but there's not really a lot of value in picking up these guys right now.
Yeah, and you could point to the Crawford boxes, right, with Correa, but it doesn't seem like he's a guy who's a heavy pull power guy. So I don't know how big of a difference it's going to make. But obviously, he's had a lot of success in Houston much earlier in his career, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the infield is the same size regardless of what place you play, and he just loves hitting grounders and specifically the double plays. And I don't think that's going to change in Houston. So we'll see how Correa does. He is going to be playing every day though for third base, right? He's not going to be sharing duties with Jeremy Pena or anything. So there's something to be said about playing every single day. But I don't think his bat numbers are going to be any better because he's now going to be in Houston. All right. Some other really marginal moves. I think one that, or a couple I want your take on because they involve Orioles. Cedric Mullins is now going to be playing center field for the Mets. He's going to be starting every day there. And granted, he was already kind of starting most days in Baltimore, so it's not really a change in terms of playing time for him. Is there any change in his value going from, Baltimore to New York?
I think just maybe a slight bump with the lineup. I'll be interested to see how many lefties he sits against. I think he'll be in there against some of them, but probably not all of them. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much they let him steal. I think that's obviously, he's a nice power speed guy, but the steals are a little bit more reliable. So it seems like they've been letting, like Juan Soto and Lindor run. So hopefully they let Mullins run too. So I'd just say slight lineup bump. Seems like he's still going to be hitting towards the bottom of the order though. So I don't think there's a huge change in the value necessarily.
Yeah, the Mets still have Tyrone Taylor on their roster, who's a righty, so he could come in for lefties presumably. But defense is fine, right? He was playing center field for the Mets mostly, so would not be surprised to see if there was some platooning there. But and then I guess the other move, Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano going to the Padres. O'Hearn probably slots in DH just because Luis Arraez is pretty entrenched at first base, but it does give them the option, I guess, to have Arraez DH and O'Hearn play in the field at first base. I don't think there's really any change in value for me. I mean, O'Hearn's been decent, but I don't think moving to the Padres makes him any better. Like maybe there's an improvement in counting stats because of the lineup that he's in, but at the same time, I don't know if this merely makes him a big change where he goes from a guy who already was kind of like rostered in a good chunk of 12 teamers to like a must add. I don't know if this move makes him like that.
Yeah, I don't think the Padres lineup has really been better than the Orioles this year, but it's because it's been so weak at the bottom. So obviously this is going to fix that and definitely lengthen out their lineup. Ahern's still going to be in a platoon, but Laureano, I think all this does is just kind of reaffirm that he should be added in most formats. He's been getting a lot of regular playing time recently for kind of the first time all season, and he's been producing, especially with home runs. So I think that, the Padres outfield outside of Jackson Merrill is really, really weak. So I think he's going to be in there, almost every day.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thing because the people have been manning left field for the Padres. Gavin Sheets, who obviously had like a nice start to the season this year, but has kind of slowed down a little bit. Bryce Johnson, who I've never heard of, he's Apparently, he was traded from Pittsburgh this season. But yeah, he's also been playing left field for them. So it
Yeah,
feels
Brandon Lockridge, who they traded, and then
sure.
Jason Hayward was playing some outfield
Oh,
too.
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. So yeah, I think that all being said, I mean, if Laureano is kind of batting, let's just say back third of the lineup, back half of the lineup, um, you feel good about him still in like 12 teamers?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same. I guess he won't be hitting as high in the order, but I think he'll still, be hitting it in a. I think O'Hearn is good enough against righties that he'll be in the middle third, and then I think Laureano is probably going to be in the bottom third.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing with Laureano, the speed has never necessarily been the calling card there, but he's already had the most homers he's had in a season since 2019 at 15. So even though he is moving to the Padres, which frankly Petco Park's not necessarily the greatest park to hit at. It is a small ding, I guess, compared to Camden. It's not that big of a ding, though, right? All things considered. So it's probably not going to hurt him as much moving to the Padres and playing home games in San Diego.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, we're not going to talk about anything else because all the other trades are kind of boring, if we're being honest. I think the one thing we do want to talk about, though, is Manuel CLASE. So, got put on disciplinary leave due to some allegations regarding gambling. Obviously, pretty serious ramifications there. Baseball wise, though, this kind of means that Kate Smith locks in as the closer for the Guardians, who already, there was an argument that Kate Smith could have been picked up in saves only leagues just because of how good of a pitcher he is. But yeah, any thoughts here on the kind of like the closer situation in Cleveland? Do you think Kate Smith kind of holds on to that role, or does guys like Hunter Gaddis like maybe slip in, grab a save here and there, and have a little bit more value?
Yeah, I think it's going to be him for the lion's share, maybe like at least 80%. Of course, he blew his first opportunity. I think it was the same day all this happened. Like, I got the notification because I had my trade, passing notifications off for the trade deadline. Went out and added Kate Smith in a saves league. He blows the save right away. It's like, great, I get punished for being first to the punch. And then I think he pitched a scoreless ninth in a game where they were going to have a save and then scored a couple in the eighth. So it seems like he's going to be the kind of reliable go-to guy. His ratios this year are actually a little bit they're not great after they were fantastic last year. I think he's just getting a little bit unlucky and maybe a little overused. The Guardians lean on their bullpen super heavily, but I think he's the guy. I'd probably rank him above all these closer situations that just became vacant. I'd probably rank Smith as the biggest one. I would have said Griffin Jacks, but he got dealt to the Rays right at the buzzer. So yeah, I think that Smith is kind of Smith and Randy Rodriguez. I guess I would say are kind of like neck and neck for good new closing options.
Yeah, one guy to keep an eye out in saves and holds leagues, Eric Sabrowski, who's the lefty in the pen for the Guardians. He actually hasn't pitched since Saturday, so unfortunately, we have no game data to like prove that this is going to be happening. But as kind of the primary lefty in that bullpen, I would not be surprised to see him get a few more holds opportunities. But he's got some good stuff, really good strikeout numbers. But again, that's kind of being the lefty in the bullpen, it kind of helps for those sort of opportunities to get some holds here and there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, that is it for trades and all that. Obviously, I believe Nick and Spore had their deadline live stream earlier today, so can check that out as well to hear their thoughts. But we are going to talk about streamers for next week because this is still a fantasy baseball podcast and we care about streamers. So yeah, how did things go with some of the guys that we suggested 2 weeks ago?
Yep, gotta have our streamers. 2 weeks ago, it was coming out of the All-Star break, so the schedules were a little tentative, so kind of a shot in the dark. But so we had Tomoyuki Sugano. He was a two-step Cleveland and Colorado. Went 1-1, only threw 9 2/3, but 12 strikeouts, 3.72 ERA, a little bit of a ugly 1.65 WHIP. He had a terrible start against Cleveland, but then kind of redeemed himself on the weekend against Colorado, so it didn't end up being too bad. Then we had Aaron Savali for the White Sox, went against Pittsburgh. Great stream. I think it was a Sunday stream, so hopefully, you could take some categories in your leagues with that. I got the win, 6 scoreless innings, 6 strikeouts, and a .67 WHIP. And then Logan Allen, I recommended based on a two-step, but his schedule changed, so kind of like a incomplete washout there. And then, yeah, coming for this week, I would say schedules are still a little tentative because teams are sorting out their rotations after they've, traded pitchers, acquired pitchers, whatever their case is after the deadline. So a little bit of a grain of salt, double check the schedules. First one's Michael Soroka, we talked about earlier, formerly Nationals, now Cubs. He's 11% Yahoo, 43% CBS, so way more rostered in CBS leagues. Depends on how the schedule shakes out, but what I saw in Roster Resource right now is a two-step this coming week, one at home against Cincinnati and one at St. Louis. So those are two kind of good to great matchups for Soroka. Definitely good play in wins leagues, probably a good play in quality starts too. Second one is Mike Burrows of the Pirates. He's 7% Yahoo, 13% CBS, so pretty low rostered. Looks like he, with the Pirates trade away Bailey Falter, they're moving their rotation around a little bit, but he could get 2 home starts, San Francisco and Cincinnati, 2 weaker offenses in a pretty good pitcher's park, and Burrows has had a couple of nice outings lately. Next one, Justin Verlander, Giants, 18% Yahoo, 39% CBS. Was rumored that he might get traded, but he did not. He just had a good start against Pittsburgh this past week, and this week he's either going to get another start just against Pittsburgh, or he'll get 2 starts, one at Pittsburgh and one at home against Washington. Again, 2 pretty streamable offenses there. Washington can hurt you a little bit, though, with, Wood and Abrams and those guys. And then lastly, super deep leagues, Davis Martin on the White Sox, 3% Yahoo, 7% CBS. Looking to likely line up for 2 starts at Seattle and versus Cleveland. So at Seattle, good matchup, on the road there. And then Cleveland at home, pretty solid matchup too. Lower ceiling play because he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but he usually has solid ratios. Although I would say he's definitely a notch below the other 3 guys. But yeah, could get four decent 2-start options that I'll definitely be going for in some of my leagues to up my volume.
Yeah, as we mentioned, I highly recommend that Soroka pickup, and as much as it hurts, I highly recommend the Verlander pickup too, just because he did really well for me this week when I picked him up for his stream against Pittsburgh, and I was looking at his schedule, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep him. So yeah, he's turned in a couple good starts, and even though he's super old now, I guess relatively speaking, it's nice to see him still be able to spin it. So yeah, great picks. Definitely recommend Soroka if he's somehow available in your league. I don't know how he's 11% roster at Yahoo. That number needs to go up, but
it's got to be the ERA sending people away.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for today's Trade Deadline Palooza podcast. Obviously, this is going out on Saturday, so it's a little bit dated, but nonetheless, hope you enjoyed that conversation. Again, you can find us on Twitter, ThisWeekPL. Send us your comments and questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at the John K and Patrick at @PFitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitcher List podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you listen to your podcast, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitcher List Pro. By doing so, you can join us on the Pitcher List Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there. And that is all for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.